Hi, I'm Mika, and I'm feeling broken.
Hi, I'm Becca, and I'm feeling reflective.
And this is All You Can Feel, your weekly fangirl fix, where we talk fandom, friendship, and falling in love, and then... Imagine watching for like 8 to 9 years.
No payoff.
So, similar to my love life, there was no payoff.
It's one of those scenes that I'm like, I think I lived that.
I love a man that yearns. These are just like the most obvious ones. Like, basically, if anyone knows me,
if you know her,
you know who's gonna be on this.
Troy and Gabriella break up in High School Musical 2. First of all, she's not going to stay in that kind of relationship, and I didn't do that more than once.
Unless so fun.
And then breaking down.
Yeah, so this episode we're gonna be talking about heartbreak. Woo.
Yay! We're feeling a certain type of way. We were thinking about talking about some movies or things that we've been enjoying. Heartbreak took over instead. So you get to hear us talk about that.
You can all blame me for that.
Yay!
We're going to be kind of diving into maybe like pieces of media and characters that really resonate with us at certain points of our lives. Doesn't need to be eternal. That's a pun for later. Basically kind of describing our love lives or like our journeys through relationships in as vague but also a specific way as possible, because we're not about to dox ourselves or dox the people that we've been with or that we've had feelings for, etc. But we'd like to at least be honest about how we've felt and how we feel, so that's why we're here.
I don't necessarily want the world to know about the people that I'll be reflecting on.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I do think the feelings around it are important. And exploring our heartbreak, pretty significant, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate. You have characters or scenes that really resonate, and I, for one, would love to know what everybody's scenes are.
Yeah, that's what I would like to know as well. What scenes stand out to you, or like when you're going through something, what are your go-to movies to kind of get you through it, but also in a way, like maybe it reflects your life in a more romanticized way. So without further ado, what are some, I guess, characters or movies or TV shows that you thought of when we decided to make this about heartbreak?
Yeah, I was up a little later last night looking up as many breakup scenes as I could find on YouTube. Which was not a very fruitful search, by the way. It was like 2 edits, like multi-fandom edits, but of like the same 6 shows. They were fine. The edits were great. And then it was like Jennifer Aniston in the breakup. And I was like, this is not working in my favor. Yeah. But I did reflect on some. I've got them I've got a little notebook here, guys. I've got them separated into a couple categories, which are like ones that are sort of reminiscent of the actual acts that broke me, and ones that are reminiscent sort of a feeling of shame. The first one being Phoebe and Cole breaking up in Charmed. I know. Who's going to be listening to this and even know who I'm talking about?
I was about to say, I was like, I don't know.
But it is intrinsic to me. There's like, in season 5, they really go through it. They basically get a divorce. And it comes down to, which I'm sure this is a theme that will be across a bunch of these relationships, one of them not believing in the other one. As being capable of being better or being good or changing their wrongs. And I would say when I was younger, I probably aligned more with Phoebe in this way because Cole was the one that was being like a whole demon with a lot of issues. And Phoebe was the one that was like slighted. As I've gotten older, first of all, I just love Cole a lot, so that's my own problem. But I also kind of resonate with the idea of feeling like you're losing something really important to you because of your own mistakes or your own behaviors. So at this point, I'm a little bit both, and it's just very sad to watch. And I watched it. I watched it last night, and in the scene I was watching, Cole is like fully vulnerable, breaking down, and Phoebe is just stone cold, not responsive. And I was like, I'm both of you. I think I'm both of
Yeah,
you.
that's very much your energy.
Somehow I am both of you all at once. So that's my first
Mhm.
one. Do you what is one of yours?
I was obviously gonna put Stefan and Caroline
Yeah.
from the Vampire Diaries on here, so I might as well just go into that. Just because I feel like they're in the same ballpark
I think
of
so too.
genre. For anyone who doesn't know, in the Vampire Diaries, Stefan and Caroline were best friends to lovers, and I definitely related to Caroline's just insistent pining for Stefan for the duration of the show. And at the start of the show, Stefan's like, it's never gonna happen. And obviously they get married, but then Stefan, sorry, spoilers, spoiler alert.
Sorry guys, if you haven't watched yet.
If you haven't watched the Vampire Diaries, Stefan dies. I have a lot of issues with that. He dies on their wedding night, by the way.
It just gets worse and worse the further you go.
Yeah, imagine watching for like 8 to 9 years.
Yeah,
And
no payoff.
So similar to my love life, there was no payoff. Yearning for my best friend. I think I had like really projected onto. There were a lot of elements that were similar in our relationship and our friendship. You know, this person would go to me for emotional support. I tried my best to like show up for them, and vice versa. And there came a point where, like in the show, it became harder to kind of just stay friends. And so, similar to Caroline, there was a break, and like, yeah, I have feelings for you. I just want you to know that. And then we stopped being friends. And in the show, Stefan and Caroline go on to kind of deepen their relationship, and they, you know, end up getting married, only for that to turn out great. And in my life, that was very much not the case. I fully lost this person because
Probably
they're
for
not
the best.
Probably for the best, and they're not like Stefan too in a lot of ways. They're not a vampire.
Yeah, like it's probably for the best because like they would die on your wedding.
Yeah, if it was a 1-to-1 comparison,
yeah, we wouldn't want
they
that.
would be. But yeah, a lot of it had to do with Caroline being like this, in her words, insecure, neurotic control freak, which is also how I would describe myself. He was like a really calming presence, Stefan, and so yeah, I like really related to that. And there's this one speech that she makes in season 6, episode 7. And set to the song Concrete Angel, but not the Concrete Angel
Recite
by Martina McBride. I'm not going to recite it. I don't want to recite it. But I can recite it.
But she can. It is a gift.
It is a gift and a curse. And she just kind of confronts him about why, because he's like kind of dense, and he's like, I don't understand why. Why did you have feelings for me? He said, why do you have feelings for me? Why did you have feelings for me? And she goes off on him, and she cites all these reasons that, you know, you were there for me. Peak cinema. And I've been known to not make speeches to that quality because my speeches are not great, but I do be a yapper. I do be yapping. And so I have had instances where I think I relate to just kind of going off on someone and being like, what do you mean, why?
Yeah,
I
think that
a document explaining why.
You're very emotionally open in that way. I feel like a lot of people don't want to address their conflicts. Historically, me. But you are definitely one who would, I think, very much like Caroline, be like, well, here it is. Here, what do you mean? Here it is.
Yeah.
Which actually made me think of another one that's on my list for similar reasons, but not quite the same one. So I think you'll relate to it, which is Gigi and Alex from He's Just Not That Into You.
Don't stop.
I was like, she's gonna feel this one. I chose, again, for that sort of like shame factor, because like in that scene where she shares her feelings and he rejects her, he's very condescending to her, and it makes her feel so small before she kind of reclaims the moment. And I'm just like, just watching it, I was like, oh, I'm taken back. Put me back. It's a very uncomfortable like spot to be in with someone who you have feelings for, especially when you consider that they're, spoiler alert, in game. Spoiler alert from this movie from however many years ago. That particular scene is one of those scenes that I'm like, I think I lived that. And Gigi, of course, is very good about then sharing her feelings, which I'm not good about. So if I was in her shoes, I probably would have just left, never talked to him again. But I think that you are the kind of person who maybe would have stood her ground a little bit. If not in the moment, then at some point.
I think growing up, Gigi was the kind of person that I aspired to be like in terms of how she handled that situation.
Yeah.
Where, you know, he's condescending to her because she puts herself out there all the time. Like, she's trying so hard to find her person, and he tried to be her wingman, but there obviously was more between them, and she picked up on it, and he didn't. And so he kind of berates her for not... He basically says you read too much into it, even though everybody knows that she didn't. She totally read the situation correctly. He's just afraid. And so she calls him out on that. And there's this line in that movie where she says, like, at least I put myself out there, or something. Like, it's better that I put myself out there and get my heart broken than not feel anything at all. Like, not live how you live, which is, like, in a cowardly fashion. And growing up, I was like, I don't know if I'd ever be able to be like that. And I think I've gone through enough heartbreak now that I can, and I have, like, had moments where, like, I can own up to, you know what, it sucks to be the person to be this open, but I would rather have felt something than to not feel anything at all. So I definitely feel her. And yeah, just, it sucks that he kind of projected onto her that way. I love that, you know, he obviously made up for it in spades.
Right.
And they ended up together. I mean, that scene with the pen at the end.
That is so amazing. Cute. Also, like, the part where he's just realizing slowly, like, oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute, I do. I can't stop thinking about her. It's so good.
I love a man that yearns.
We love, like, romantic comedies.
Yeah, when his employees come in and he's, like, on the phone trying to, like, reach her.
Yeah.
And they're like, dude. And he's like, oh, I have feelings for her. I'm like, yeah, that's good. You dumbass.
He was so mean in that breakup. Like, not breakup scene, but the rejection scene.
It was really rough because it's like, oh, I'm with you in that, oh, I've lived this.
Yeah, it's uncomfy.
Like how you said, he made her feel small, because that's so real. My next one is To All the Boys I've Loved Before. These are just, like, the most obvious ones. Like, basically, if anyone knows me,
if you already know her.
You know who's gonna be on this list. Caroline, Laura Jean, you already know.
Yep, these are the ones.
Anytime I've asked, you know, that one of those prompts back in the olden days on Twitter or on Tumblr, you're asking your mutuals for who's the fictional character that you think of when you think of me, or who would you cast to play me, blah, blah, blah. I would always get Laura Jean. And for good reason, because I used to write love letters all the time.
Yeah, you have a similar energy.
Very similar energy. In fact, I don't want to, like, show how messy my room is, but I do have a hat box somewhere, which in the book, that's what she puts her, and in the movies, she puts her love letters in there. And I used to put my love letters in there as well. I'm pretty sure I do have some letters in a hat box somewhere. I would write love letters. This was all before I read the books and watched the movies. They never turned out well. Unlike Laura Jean, you know, my little sister didn't send them out. I don't have a little sister. I'm both the older and the younger
imagining your
sister.
Little brother sending them out.
Yeah, no, he has more sense than that. And so I wouldn't send them so much as I would give them to the person, like, in real life, which is its own humiliation. I mean, a lot of my friends have always been like, oh, but I admire that about you. You're so brave, etc. And I'm like,
I've said that.
Yeah, when you're in that situation and you're like doing it,
Mortifying.
you're all of a sudden you're like, I actually hate every fiber of myself, and how how it all turned out afterwards. You know, you hate yourself a
Yeah.
little bit, but I do have a lot of love for my younger self, being like, you know what, yeah, like you were really vulnerable and honest, and
It's
unfortunately
good.
that comes with a lot of risks. And so I really looked up to Lara Jean. I remember I was on the bus to school, and as I was reading it, it was uncanny. I was like, is she in my walls right now, Jenny Han? Is she
Has she been
has
spying
she
on
been
me? What is
spying on
this?
me? It was crazy. Like how Stefan and Caroline reminded me of me, and, you know, someone that I used to have feelings for. And to a certain extent, it was more than a friendship.
Yeah.
Some boundaries there were definitely being crossed. I was reminded of that relationship with Stefan and Caroline, but I was also reminded of it when I was reading Lara Jean and Peter. But similar to Stefan, this person just didn't have the same energy as Peter in the end. Like Peter kind of had the same insecurities, but it just turned out differently. Really related to Lara Jean's kind of social anxiety, because a lot of the time she felt like she could only really be real through her letters, and she really found herself in this fake relationship. Her aesthetic, her interests, the way that she talks to herself or about herself,
Very you.
very very Mika coded. Also,
It's
fun
strange.
fact, Jenny Han and I have the same birthday. It's crazy. I'm like,
It
this
is
girl,
very weirdly connected.
she lives in my house somewhere. I can feel it.
Your shared birthday, maybe it connects your lives in a way, and
I
she's
think
like
it low
pulling
key does,
inspiration. She
because
like
I'm
comes
like,
to her in a dream.
also a few years ago, she asked her followers to like send her song recommendations for a fall playlist that she was building, and so I sent her one, and she put it on there.
Yeah, she
Um,
did.
I was seen.
That was me.
That was me.
I
So
did this.
yeah, I had a lot of resentment with Lara Jean up until recently, honestly. Like
Really?
yeah, because the way that things turned out between me and all my exes,
Yeah.
it kind of was like, you know, where Lara Jean kind of thrived from writing these letters and being honest and trying to explore these relationships. I did not thrive. I mean, I thrived in a
Right.
different way. I
Yeah, not the
grew,
same.
but there was no one to grow with. And so
Yeah.
I felt like I was being punished for being vulnerable. And it's not like I did it because of her, but it was kind of like our lives were almost parallel, even though hers is
Right.
obviously fictional.
Because you were at this around the same
I was
age
around the
too
same age. And
when
so
you were reading it.
it just kind of felt like I was being punished in a way. And also I received some pretty traumatic mail, or like traumatic like letters.
Sure.
So instead of getting love letters back, it was like, no, actually this person hates you. Actually this person wants you to so it was
We're real vulnerable today.
yeah, I'm feeling real vulnerable today. And so it was kind of like, whoa, girl,
Hey, wait a minute.
can you like
Oh,
calm
that's so
down? Okay,
tough.
we get it. Peter's in love with you. But now that I'm a little older and time has passed and there's a little bit more like emotional distance, I have a lot of love for her story still. I
Yeah.
think instead of me being like, oh, like I can never have that, it's more like, oh, the people that I was writing letters to, it it just wasn't meant to be, and they weren't in a place, I think, where they were ready to receive such vulnerability. Because there was a lot.
Yeah. It is just a
Yeah.
different your story is different than Lara Jean's.
Yeah.
And also, kind of like what we were talking about last episode, stories have a way of being wrapped up really nicely, and real life doesn't always go that way. But also,
No
real life
kidding.
is operating on no kidding. Real life is operating on a full lifetime trajectory, whereas a story is often operating on a very small window. Often, not always.
Yeah.
So if you were to break your life up into individual stories like that, you could almost definitely find full arcs of, the conflict to a happy resolution. And then it just happens again.
Yeah.
I was thinking sort of in the similar, not that I resonated with this character, but that I wished that I was like that.
Okay.
That I wished in that specific situation I had been the way that she is,
Mhm.
which is when Troy and Gabriella break up in High School Musical 2.
What about us?
We just break into song.
What
First of all, amazing song.
Foundational.
Amazing. Honestly, deserved. Although I relate. I get you, Troy. I do get you. It was one of those relationships that I really connected with because it's so romanticized. And so when they broke up, I was genuinely pretty upset. Of course, it gets remedied, which is fine. She basically kind of stands her ground that it's not what she wants. That she's not going to stay in that kind of relationship. And I didn't do that more than once. So that is an example, as well as the Phoebe and Cole one of like Phoebe's perspective of just being willing to stand up for yourself and draw a line with this person that you care about, that I found myself failing to do. And in fact, the relationship of note that this makes me think of, I never did that. I was the one that was broken up with. So it's even more humiliating and shameful in that way. When it's like, for me to feel like, I feel that way anyway. It is not intrinsically shameful.
Yeah.
But just to feel like I could have stood up for myself, and I didn't do that. Of course, I was younger then and less confident.
Yeah.
So now if someone were to do that to me now, watch out.
Yeah, I think you've grown you've grown immensely since then. So, and if
One would hope.
If nothing else, I would probably end up being like, "Hey, girl,"
Mika would be like, "Hey, you should look out for yourself.
Workshop this, address a little bit."
Yeah.
So,
Troy and Gabriella.
That's a good one. First of all, incredible soundtrack. That movie changed my life. I was like,
it's so good.
I can see it right now, the blue lighting, everything. Yes. Anyways, sort of similar to that, I had Belly and Conrad from The Summer I Turned Pretty. Just because I feel like with this relationship, we'll call it a relationship, okay? I would say that I really relate to Belly's. She was just really confused. She was just unsure of where Conrad's head was at any given point. Now, Conrad was obviously going through something. This is mostly based on season 2 of the show. He kind of shut her off. He shut her
Turned
out.
his humanity off. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. She was just kind of left wondering about his intentions, about his feelings, whereas he was kind of like, well, I thought my feelings were obvious. They were not. No. They were not. That led to misunderstandings, which led to inevitably their breakup. I don't know what else to say other than I relate to that.
Yeah, it's a pretty difficult situation with those two, because obviously, like you said, the circumstances are pretty terrible.
They're pretty tough.
They're pretty rough, but it's just not, the communication isn't there. Clear communication does go a long way. Being
clear is kind.
Yeah, clear is kind.
Yeah, clear is kind, even if it's painful. So, yeah, that's that. I have another one, though, that I can kind of expand on, which is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Yes.
Ha ha ha! My Eternal reference earlier. It's all about the idea of breaking up with someone and wanting to, like, forget them completely because of the pain. And so, literally, it's like a sci-fi movie, but sci-fi in, like, a very small way, a very small localized way, wherein there is an actual agency or like a lab that you can go to get your memories erased of your ex or your dog or like whoever it is that you've lost that you can't bear to like think of anymore. And so I relate a lot to Clementine, who is one of the main characters, and she is the girlfriend of the main character, who's played by Jim Carrey, and she is kind of seen as this manic pixie dream girl, and also there's a lot of commentary about how she may or may not have like BPD, and so since I have BPD, I relate a lot to her like quirks, but also just how fast her mood can kind of like go burp, burp, burp. I feel like sometimes some of my past love interests, will say, haven't really seen me as a person. There's a scene she gives to Joel in like maybe the second half of the movie, like towards the end, and they're in a bookstore, and side note, this is so cool that they did this in the film where, like, you know, as his memory is being erased of this moment in the bookstore, the spines or like the books start to kind of go blank, or like they start to be turned so that you don't know what the covers are. Like basically their surroundings start to fade in this very visual visceral way. And she's giving him this speech and she's like, I'm not a concept, I'm just a girl who's trying to find her own peace of mind, so don't assign me yours. That's how I feel sometimes with certain people, is that they kind of, to be fair, I'm a creep.
I'm a weirdo.
I'm a yapper. She's got her special interests. I hate this term, but I do be neurospicy sometimes. And so I can kind of understand that. Yeah, me too. Why? Wow. Maybe why somebody feels that way, or like sometimes I can be a little opaque. So like for all of me being like, being clear is kind, communication is key, I am so much more open with girls than I am with guys. It's just how it is. I think part of it is because of my upbringing in like the Protestant evangelical movement, where like especially during purity culture, during, as if it's not still happening, but like in a purity culture kind of environment where it was very much like every single instance a boy talks to you is like the potential for marriage, so don't talk to boys. It didn't teach me how to maintain or even how to instigate like normal friendships with men. And so I think that kind of lent itself into being a little less fully emotionally available, or like with this Stefan person.
Sure, with Stefan, real IRL.
Yeah, I think that I was almost too emotionally open. I don't regret being vulnerable. I think that for what I knew and where I was at, it makes sense that I was, you know, a lot more open. And then after that relationship kind of went up in flames and completely destroyed my self-esteem, I completely withdrew and I just stopped being as open with guys. So it was like there are a couple of guys who, on one hand, I would kind of tell them if I was going through something, but I wasn't actually being open about what I was going through, or I wasn't like telling them like I'm actually going through it right now. Like it would be after the fact, like, oh sorry, I was going through it. I wouldn't let them in to see where I was at. And I think that's where being a manic pixie dream girl comes into play, where I'm not saying it's my fault, I just am like able to kind of see where that thinking came into play. It was harder, I think, for them to establish some sort of real, authentic image of me because I wasn't necessarily being real or authentic. That doesn't mean that, like, you know, it was okay for them to put me on a pedestal. No. But I just think that it makes sense, just looking from my viewpoint. Like Clementine, I'm very... I could be volatile. I don't think I'm as volatile anymore. I think my emotions can still definitely be like, wow, woohoo! I don't lash out so much as I lash inwards, and I think you can probably attest to that.
Yeah.
I think someone here can probably vouch for...
I mean, I'm glad that you're not lashing out, but the redirecting, I'm like, how about we just lash less? Fewer lashing out or lashing in. Less lashing. Spare yourself. Oh my gosh. She really does bring it inward.
Instead of like pushing out a tornado of emotion, it's like, I'm gonna keep it all in here.
That's your tornado. You're like inward tornado.
Makes me feel like a drill.
That's a good one. Let's see. I've got 3 more. How many do you have?
I have, let me see. Technically 2 more.
Okay, so I'll go my next one.
Yeah.
This one, we're gonna kind of go back a little bit to he's just not that into you. Apparently that's the movie of the episode for me. which is not one that I sought out to think about, but then when I revisited it, I was like, whoa. Which is Beth and Neil.
I knew it. I knew it.
Yeah.
Every time
let me clarify. Yeah, because the third one of note, I'm on board for, doesn't make me sad because I'm like, good, you should leave your husband. So with Beth and Neil, yeah, it's just, first of all, they're great. What a great couple. What a great couple for the movie. But it is sad to see this relationship that's been 7 years deep. For her, like in this scene where she's finally opening up, she's like, I've held this in for 5 years because I didn't know how to bring it up that she wanted to get married. Okay, for everybody who hasn't seen it. She's like, I've held this in for 5 years because I didn't know how to approach it with him, and she didn't want to ruin kind of what they had going, especially, you know, so, okay, you're 2 years into this relationship. That's a pretty significant timeline, and still early enough. But he, I think, also wasn't entirely clear about how serious he was about not getting married, and also she wasn't entirely clear about how much it meant to her. Mm-hmm. And so when it finally gets to this point where she's really been letting it kind of bubble up inside of her and just get really like gross and nasty, and it needs to come out, they kind of reach a standstill. He didn't know that she felt that way, and he's now in a position where he's like, oh, well, now I either have to marry you or I don't. And he doesn't feel like he should necessarily have to sacrifice his stance on that just to resolve that conflict that he wasn't super aware of. So I understand both sides of that. The thing that I relate to is probably a little of both again, but mostly Beth, because she went through 7 years with someone she really loves and didn't know how to express her needs. Mm-hmm. And so when they do break up, it is sad. It's not like there's a little bit of anger, but not really it's at him, but not at him. Yeah. If in a sense, because he's entitled to not want to get married, but it is frustrating for her. Just very sad for him too, I think. And so it's one of those ones that I'm like, I've definitely lived adjacently to that, mm-hmm. where you really care about a person, but something is not clicking. There's something significant that matters to both of you, but you are not on the same page with it. And yeah. It is hard to make a compromise with things like that. Mm-hmm. Obviously in the movie, he ends up stepping up for her in that way and finding a way to embrace that idea with her because he wants to be with her, mm-hmm. which is fine and something he was capable of doing. Conflicts like that aren't always that easy to resolve. And obviously in the movie, that also took time for him to get to a point where he could do that with her. Like we said, real life is not the same as a movie. So that's that one really sat with me because I was like, ugh. Yeah, I get that. Wish I had a Ben Affleck to propose to me eventually on a boat. He's so cute in that movie. Just side note.
He's so cute in that movie. It's ridiculous.
We're on a little bit of a Ben Affleck vibe.
Because of all the Ben Affleck and Matt Damon content I get on my feed, okay?
Yeah, we love that content. We also just love Ben Affleck.
Which could mean nothing. Every time we rewatch that film, and we get to Beth and Neil, we're always like, ooh, c'est toi, too. Whereas, like, for me, watching that movie, it's very much like, when I'm seeing Beth and Neil, I'm like, oh, this is just Becca.
Yeah. Like, and I brought up Gigi and Alex because there is something to be related to with that. But when we watch, I do feel I relate that more to you. I literally can't remember Jennifer Connelly's character's name.
Girl, I don't remember either.
Anyway, but I also relate heavily to her.
Yeah, more power to her.
But I'm also, it's one of those, like, I'm glad you finally did what you needed to do.
Yeah, because
watching her is,
that was painful. Her. Watching her in that movie is painful. The other ones that I had aren't, like, super about the relationship so much as maybe perception of these characters. So I relate to Summer from 500 Days of Summer. Okay. I relate to Blair Waldorf from Gossip Girl. And in kind of a similar vein of just like feeling not seen, and then with Blair being blatantly mistreated. and then for that to be romanticized. I think I kind of
Yeah.
relate to that. Everybody who loves like Chuck and Blair, get help. I say that with love. Get help. With Summer, similar to Clementine, it's just not being fully known or fully seen as a multifaceted human being. That just sucks. And then I had one more that I was thinking of as I was getting ready for this, which is in Little Women. Laurie is doing his whole speech to Joe, and Joe's like, whoa, 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 whoa. No, 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 no. And then later regretting it. But not because she had, this is my interpretation, so you can come at me in the comments for this, but I don't think she felt for him the way that he felt for her. I think she wanted, like she says in the movie explicitly, she wants to be loved. And so she feels towards the end that her train has passed. The ship has sailed.
Sure, yeah, whatever
whatever mode of transportation you're taking, I guess. It's gone.
It's out of here.
Left the station. And she feels like it's kind of passed her by, this opportunity to be like secure in some sort of like financial situation, but also just the security of being loved and cared for.
Sure.
Hard relate.
That one's a hard one.
That one, when I watched that I watched it in theaters with my mom, and I was sitting there like, I am deeply uncomfortable by how much I relate to this. And then something happened where I was seeing someone where events that transpired make me relate to it even more. So every time I rewatch it now, I'm just like, I feel so uncomfortable. But I
like
also,
too much of me here.
Yeah, there's like too much. Joe in general is very,
it's very easy to relate.
Coded. Very like, she's a writer already. She's got a little bit of deep-seated anger issues. Like, she just kind of like gets very emotional. Can we cut the cameras? Can we turn them away a little bit?
Get out of here.
And then I also relate to Amy. Similarly, in that scene with Laurie where they're in the garden, and she's like, you're being mean. And she's like, I've been second to Joe my whole life. Even though I relate to Joe on an emotional level, I think experience-wise, I also relate to Amy. I relate to that idea of feeling like you're second place, or that you're like a consolation prize.
Yeah.
A lot of the time, I have been kind of like just the option, just, the girl that you'll go to on the side because she provides excellent emotional support, but she's not as desirable as, love interest A. So I'm like always kind of second place. That scene made me like want to burst into tears in the theater, and still makes me want to burst into tears because I'm like, girl, me too. Unlike that movie, because again, real life isn't like cinema, I have no Laurie. So there's like no.
Yeah, it would be different if you had a Laurie.
Yeah, there's no.
Because then you could potentially get your Amy Laurie situation if you wanted.
I had like a little mini section called Ideals, where it's like, these are movies that like I also relate to just by nature of some of my relationships, but like I know for fact that we weren't the same energy. So I've got You've Got Mail and When Harry Met Sally, because I'm a Meg Ryan
I thought
girl.
of When Harry Met Sally too.
Like, I'm very much, best friend slow burn. Love that. Give me more of that. Even though it's torturous when you're living through it. And then You've Got Mail, one or two stand out as being like primarily online. One or two of like my past relationships.
Sure.
Where,
the mode of communication.
The mode of communication. And relates. I really relate to there's this one way that she describes like all this, nothing has meant so much something to me, because like when you're talking online, you're just kind of talking about nothing, and that is very much in line with how I communicate, I guess, with a lot of people. Yeah, those are mine. What about you?
Those are yours. The last two I have, one is sort of reminiscent again of that feeling humiliated sort of vibe. Apparently that's my energy, I don't know. And the other one is a little more, again, life circumstances. I think both of those fit me for different relationships. I'm like looking at all my rom-coms last night and like, what is what's like standing out to me, 10 things I hate about you or whatever. And I'm like, no, the bet ones don't really apply to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think. And so I was like, what about while you were sleeping? And I was like, well, it isn't that bad because it's resolved pretty quickly. But I did then immediately flash to Ever After. And I was like, obviously I've not been in a position of either of these characters where I've consciously lied about who I am within regards to that relationship, but I do think, especially for some of them, there's been a sort of not being my most authentic self, and trying, thanks to the people pleaser in me and also the conflict avoider in me and also the shyness in me, I would try to match whatever sort of persona I thought the person wanted me to have, so that they would want to be with me and want to stay with me and that I could be their perfect person. And up to my most recent relationship, there's still an element of that because I just wasn't always open. And so to be called out on that or to lose something because of that really hits with me, especially for some of those earlier relationships. In the movie, he's like basically ready to get married to her in front of everybody, and then her wicked stepmother outs her as not being who she says she is. And he responds a little bit like Alex, and he's just not that into you, where he's like
so mean, so
hits a complete 180, and she's just like crying and like says his name and like, Henry, and he's like, don't call me that. You can't call me that. I'm a prince of France. It's horrible. And so she's just obviously devastated, and it's tied in with like all the family stuff as well and her identity, and so it's worse. I vibe that, even though I obviously haven't been pretending to be an entirely different person.
Right.
None of those people have ever come back to me, probably for the best, but the other one I have is Sean and Angela from Boy Meets World.
Okay.
Because what happens at the end of the show, after they've been together for so many years and worked through their ups and downs and really shown themselves to be a strong, committed, communicative couple, is that she ends up having to move. Circumstances separate them. There's something about, back to the circumstances of certain things not matching between two people. Like, he couldn't leave with her, but she also needed to go. Like, it was important for her identity, which I think we get a little bit of that in To All the Boys too. You're kind of stuck at a crossroads, and you, I guess, maybe just can't be together if you're not able to find a way to work through that. And in the scene where they say goodbye, I wrote it down. She said, let's not say goodbye, let's just say I love you. And then he goes, I love you too. And then they hug, and then she leaves, and I'm depressed about it. And what's worse is that that's like the second to last episode of the show or something. And so there's no resolving that. That's just how they end. And then in the sequel show of Girl Meets World, when they bring her back for a cameo, it is confirmed in sequel canon that they never reconnected, even though they loved each other so much.
What? I didn't know
when I found that out in Girl Meets World, I was like, this show means nothing to me.
Yeah.
When I saw that, between how they treated that and how they treated Eric, I was like, no. There's nothing. I can't. This is not my canon.
Oh no! I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, so that's a little too much real world depression for me right there. The ones that really come out to me are the ones that are like typically a girl, but it can be anyone, I guess, who is being mistreated by their partner, like gaslit, especially by their partner, but that they really care about them. Like, that's a really hard one to sit through.
Yeah.
And I didn't choose any where it was like they obviously need to break up.
Sure.
Because obviously you should look after yourself. With that relationship, like, the feelings for me, they were very real in spite of needing to not be in that relationship. And I think many people can relate to that. For me, the things that really stand out are the like needing to be able to communicate and to work through your conflict and to be able to say, this is what I need. And so that's where some of that ideal of what these characters do, where the ideals are for me, is that like the characters that are able to say, I need this, or to draw a line in the sand, create a boundary, I'm like, God, I wish that was me. I wish that I had that. And it's inspiring in that way. And also very hard to put into practice if that's just not how you are and you haven't practiced it and haven't done it enough. And then when you don't do it, you end up really hurt.
Suffering. Yeah.
And you suffer. And honestly, like, because it doesn't always happen with some person who's got like 1,000 red flags and is like the worst partner ever. Often your partner is just also a person that's like doing their best.
Right.
But to not be clear is like, it just brings you both down and it makes things complicated. Like, I'm thinking again of Belly and Conrad. It just makes it really hard to navigate it.
Yeah.
Which is heartbreaking.
No kidding.
Those are all the ones that I could think of.
Yeah.
But I know there's more out there.
Yeah, I just thought of another one for me. Which
say it, girl.
In Fringe, Peter and Olivia.
Oh my God, Fringe.
When Olivia is replaced by, not a clone, but like an alternate universe of herself.
Oh,
so like in the show, she's called Alt-Livia. And like she lives with Peter and like does all the things that they're... Basically, it just is in this relationship with him. And then Olivia gets rescued and she comes back. But she sees the evidence of how
I'm upset already.
How Peter lived with this girl and didn't notice the difference. Anything when there's like some sort of imposter, like a clone or like an alternate version, and the girl comes back and the guy just didn't notice, that for some reason really hurts me, like personally. Not that I've ever been replaced by a clone, or have I?
Call me Peter Bishop, because
and I think it's just the idea, again, a lot of mine have to do with being known and being seen.
Yeah.
I think not only being known, but being celebrated for what maybe I've beaten myself up over. So for a lot of, like, for example, Caroline in the first season, in the first episode even, she's like, always, it's similar to Amy in Little Women, where she's like, why is it that everyone picks Elena? Why I try so hard and no one ever
I can hear her.
wants me. Yeah, I tried not to do it in a inflection because I was like, don't be a weirdo. But I have that memorized too because, you know, after editing fan edits, you're kind of like, you can hear the sound bites in your head over and over again. I also relate to Anne and Gilbert. Just like a lot of the time I relate to the girls on the outside because they're a little bit too open. I guess like I relate to girls who are too much because I feel like I'm too much.
Sure, yeah. So we're breaking it down to the core now.
Yeah, and so when it comes to like breakup scenes or like scenes where they're rejected, it feels like I'm being rejected for like being too much or too different. And then in turn, I get hurt when they inevitably get their due, you know? Like they have their person who accepts them fully for who they are. Like all
You're
the
like,
quirks,
hello.
I'm like,
come on now.
It's just kind of difficult to navigate when, you know, you're in the throes of heartbreak. As we speak, that's me right now. I'm in the throes of heartbreak. Yeah, that's
like why we're here talking about it.
Yeah, so like, you know, I have faith in the narrative because, you know, I do believe in God and I do believe that there's a plan. It's just sometimes like you don't know what you obviously when you're in the narrative, you don't know what your arc looks like fully because you're in it. And so you're just kind of like, I think these are the beats, so naturally this should happen, right? And then it doesn't happen and you're like, okay.
All right. Are we in another swing of this? Like we're in a part 2 of the conflict?
So I've been like kind of in my head and in my journaling, I've been kind of like telling myself that I'm in a mid-season. Like this is like the mid-season finale. This whole year for me has felt like a mid-season finale, if not a season finale.
Sometimes
and I don't
shows
know,
work like that.
Yeah, and I don't know when the next season is going to start or like who's going to come out of it or if anyone's gonna come back or like I don't know what's happening. I just am hopeful not in the wistful I don't know if this is gonna happen way, but hopeful in the like assured like there's something on
Right.
the horizon on the other side of this. I just don't know when I'm going to get to the other side.
You don't know when or what it'll look like.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of like going through it right now. So
You made me think of the scene in Notting Hill where he's like going through the seasons.
Yeah.
That's
me.
I feel like that's you right
That's
now.
me
You're like,
right now.
except in the movie, obviously, it takes all of a minute to do that.
Right.
For you, it's taking a year.
I'm like, geez, this montage is taking forever.
You got to get all of the footage so they can put it together.
Yeah.
When you like see the movie of your life, and you're like, oh, I see that now. You're like, okay.
You're like, it's funny because it's like I can see that for different areas of my life.
Different
like,
parts
when
of
it comes to like my writing career, I'm like, oh, there's such a narrative arc there. Like I can totally see how that came to be.
Yeah.
Or with friendship, even like you and me, I feel like there was a narrative arc there too. Us like having our little breakup moment and then coming back together and then meeting or like planning.
Yeah, meeting is like that was like our first finale.
That was our first finale.
Now we're in the second. We're like in the sequel.
Yeah, we're in the sequel right now.
The third one, whatever. The 18th one. We've got a lot of.
We have a lot of arcs. I can see it in so many different ways. It's just like when it comes to my love life, I'm like, I don't know. It's just been a lot of heartbreak.
It's rough. And it's hard to see that in all of the stuff that we watch too. I had one final thought, a reflective thought. You brought up Chuck and Blair, and I was like, man, I used to be such a Chuck and Blair shipper. I can see too, why it's not good. And yeah, and I was like, why? It's been a long time, so I don't remember all the details, but I did see Chuck and Blair on a lot of those multi-fandom videos last night. And so I was watching the breakup, and I was like, ugh. I think what it was is that I really related to Blair. And when I was watching Gossip Girl, that was when I was in a relationship very much like Chuck and Blair, and I wanted it to be good. I wanted it to be romanticized because that was more comfortable than confronting
the reality. Yeah,
it
makes sense.
And it also made me think a little bit of if you ship it, please reflect. It made me think of Matt and Elektra and Daredevil, specifically in the Daredevil TV show, because they're fine in other iterations. But in that iteration, specifically Matt's position of it, of not recognizing when you're in something that's not healthy.
Yeah.
But letting it consume you, that is heartbreaking. And,
help.
And so I'm very glad that for that particular story, he gets to a point where it's easier to deal with that.
She just had to put in Daredevil at some point.
I had to. It was on my mind. It's been on my mind this whole time. I didn't want to. I didn't want to like today. Pull on the Karen of it because I'm like, it's fine. Like that's not. I'm not heartbroken about Karen. Okay, she's got Frank Castle.
She's got Frank Castle. She's fine.
But I did think of Matt because season 2 is a rough one, guys.
We've been rewatching the Defender saga. It's
been fun.
It has been fun. I am dreading.
Also horrifying.
Dreading when we get to the actual Defenders and we get to Elektra's scenes. Not that I don't even dislike her character. I just don't think that she and Matt are healthy. And so it just kind of is uncomfortable to watch him let himself, as you say, get consumed by this relationship. It's just like watching your best friend get kind of swallowed up by a toxic relationship and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
You're like, oh.
I think we've both been in a position like that.
We definitely have, and it sucks, so.
Anyway, we always have to talk about Daredevil as the backbone of our lives.
He's not even in my background today. He's like just out of frame, but.
He's not in mine, but.
He's always in our hearts.
So. Yes. Also, I was gonna say, have we talked enough about heartbreak? Are we sufficiently?
I think we're
sufficiently.
I think we're. I'm just glad I didn't cry because I was like, I don't want to cry today. So.
This was potentially going to be a very sad episode, and I don't think it is.
I don't think it is either. I think we still had a lot of fun.
Like with heartbreak, you can come out of it. Don't do that. Do not internalize all of your feelings. That is something else we've learned today. Don't internalize.
Don't internalize.
Communicate. Clear as kinds.
But internalizing is so fun.
Clear as kind, and also be receptive when people are clear with you.
Ooh.
And don't make them feel like they are
or tiny and insignificant.
small or too much.
Yeah. So that's that, I guess.
We would love to hear about your characters and scenes that you
kind of relate to the
to.
most, and that kind of hurt you on a personal, deep level. I want to know so that I can break you.
That's it. That's the goal. We want to destroy all of you.
It's actually for my psychological torture assignment. It's due tomorrow. Just let me know.
You're just a tight deadline. You guys gotta get on this.
Yeah. So comment now. I hope you have a good week. Please take care of yourselves and your hearts. And we'll see you next time.
See you then.
Okay, bye.